Go ahead. All right, so thanks everyone for your attendance. The topic today is anxiety and quality of life in food allergy. Two maybe somewhat under discussed things, but I certainly think they're very relevant, especially for folks dealing with food allergy. So hopefully this will be interesting. We'll go through a couple of things also. I have some relatively recent data that we've gathered here on these topics, so wanted to show that to everyone as well. So without further ado. Oh, man, I can't advance my slide. Let's see. There we go. So the overview, we'll speak briefly about the impact of food allergy. Many of these points are things that I'm sure a lot of folks here know about, but good to just repeat them to give ourselves context. Then talk a little bit about how food allergy can affect anxiety and quality of life. Talk about how treatment for food allergy can also affect anxiety and quality of life, including, as I said, some recent data that we have from our center. Talk a little bit about how we can help, and wanted to talk about one study that I've been helping with them, as well as a number of other members of our team with virtual and augmented reality around food challenges at our center. And then just lastly, a few quick points about COVID-19, food allergy, and anxiety, because there's been a few studies that have come out recently that I think are kind of interesting. So just to step back, as I said, and talk about the impact of food allergy, I think this is probably a slide that's been shown before at other talks, but it's clear that this is a growing issue. Just to reiterate, up to 2 kids per classroom have some type of food allergy. There's significant costs associated with that. And it's more than just peanuts. So many people have multiple allergies and have to deal with the consequences of multiple allergies and potentially avoidance or how to seek treatment for multiple food allergies. There's lots of factors potentially at play. And, our big mission here is not only to look at therapies to try to treat and cure food allergy, but also to look at ways to prevent food allergy, since it does seem to be on the rise. And how can we understand how we might be able to prevent people from even developing food allergy. So here's a map basically showing across the world rough prevalence of food allergy in children. You can see that the estimates vary somewhat widely, but basically, somewhere between 5 to 7%, and it really is something that's occurring worldwide. And it seems to be on the rise. These colored boxes are corresponding to the US, Britain, and Australia, basically making the point that emergency department visits, I can't say that word, emergency department visits have been rising for folks with food allergy symptoms or anaphylaxis. And I think it probably goes without saying, but we should say it, that food allergy impacts all aspects of the life of those who have it and those who care for people who have it. So impacts across physical, mental, and emotional health, having to deal with dietary restrictions, being excluded from events, for kids being bullied because of their allergies or their inability to eat birthday cake. The social impact for families and loved ones, having to avoid certain activities, having to be careful to go out to eat, careful with travel, careful with, other social events, and all the anxieties that can come from that. It's really something that impacts a lot of people. I can personally speak to it with my family and dealing with kids with food allergy. And so I know a little bit of it myself, but even then, just to quantify how much this actually affects folks. As far as just an economic number, these are rough estimates, but it's on the order of billions of dollars a year in terms of what folks have to spend or either spending on treatment or costs to have to avoid things or time costs, and that's equates to nearly over $4,000 per child. So it's critically important that we understand and measure anxiety and quality of life in our food allergy, and also the effect that our treatments may have. And I think, this is just important to state. I want to just hold on this for a second. I really think, we need to be mindful of this. And it's one of the things that we're really trying to understand more when we have our studies, not just treatments directed at food allergy, but also the anxiety and quality of life issues that can come about from it. So how do we measure anxiety and quality of life? Really, it is a lot of survey type instruments. So there are age specific and food allergy specific surveys. Some examples are the food allergy quality of life questionnaire. The SOFA is I believe the scale of food allergy anxiety. These are just different ways that we can basically be able to quantify a little bit more what folks are going through in their day-to-day lives surrounding food allergy. And there are often surveys where there's what we'd call a Likert scale. I'll show an example of one on the next slide. Things like somewhat agree, mostly agree, always agree, those types of scales, or like 1 to 5 scales, which can feel a little oversimplified, but it's really a way that we can then quantify this and track it over time and look at trends. Other things you can do are daily scoring of anxiety. I'll talk about that a little bit with one of the studies that we'll go through in a later slide, as well as just asking about the burden of treatments themselves. And so this is an example of one of the questionnaires. This is the food allergy quality of life questionnaire. This is for kids ages 8 to 12. So these questionnaires exist for younger and older age groups, for adults, as well as for caregivers. And you can see, as I said, it asks, and some of you may have taken these surveys if you participated in our trials here, but basically ask like, how troublesome are these different things? And then the kid can rate it based on the emotion of the face. And then each face also is given a descriptor as well, a written descriptor. So how can food allergy treatment help? So just looking through the literature in terms of how food allergy treatment may help in terms of anxiety and quality of life. So generally speaking, when it has been looked at, for most people who undergo oral immunotherapy, anxiety and quality of life improve. It's at least 2/3 in some studies, if not more. And so that's really heartening to see. As well, it does seem that if a person has sort of a worse quality of life surrounding food allergy at baseline, then they tend to have more benefit. And then reaching maintenance dosing, so getting through OIT to a maintenance dose, is often significant in terms of helping with anxiety and quality of life. So you often see that, there's a improvement there once someone is able to get through OIT and get to a maintenance dose. And this tends to hold true across single allergen OIT, multi-allergen OIT, and OIT with the help of biologics, all things that we have previous studies or current studies. So here's some recent data from our center, somewhat along those lines, talking about, how quality of life and other things may improve before and after OIT. So these were participants in our studies who underwent OIT, and this was using that food allergy quality of life questionnaire, basically looking at different domains and then total scores. And you can see overall from before to after OIT, there did appear to be a significant improvement in terms of quality of life and anxiety, as well as for parents, the burden felt from food allergy tended to go down. And so an additional study to go through. So we've also now been doing daily anxiety scoring for patients in some of our clinical trials. So this was for 94 patients. Median age was 13, but these were kids and adults. They often had more than one suspected allergy, and actually the median was 6. And this was single and multi-allergen OIT. And they filled out the daily diaries and other questionnaires. And they also rated their anxiety from a scale to 0 to 100, with 0 being better and 100 being higher anxiety. So the higher the score, the more the anxiety. And as you can see, this is kind of taking all participants and looking at those daily anxiety scores. And then the blue line is a best fit regression model, which I won't go into the details of how that is derived and what it's controlled for. But basically over time, from the start of OIT, our best fit shows that there does seem to be kind of a steady, somewhat slow but steady downward trend in anxiety through since the beginning of OIT. It sort of levels out there at the end, although you can see the gray shading around the line. Basically, the bigger it is, the less confident we are in the model. So a little bit hard to interpret out here when it's kind of leveling out. And then interestingly, when you look at kids versus adults, kids seem to have that same sort of slow but steady trend in the leveling out. For adults, granted, there's a little bit less data, but so the model's a little bit less confident, but basically showing that it seems to be maybe even a more significant drop off and then a leveling out thereafter. And then this is, I thought, interesting. Certainly, I don't think it should be interpreted as something bad about the parents, but I do think it's interesting that when kids scored anxiety themselves, there was a consistent decline anxiety through OIT, but when parents scored anxiety for them, it was pretty much level, even going up near the end. Maybe some insight there, even as far as how we could be helping parents more to cope. Certainly, I think these are well-meaning, wonderful parents, but I just think it's interesting that kids seem to maybe have a different perspective. Some other findings from the study. So the number of symptoms someone has, not surprisingly, affects the amount of anxiety that they may experience during OIT. There's no significant difference between multi and single allergen OIT studies. And interestingly, for those who were unable to complete OIT, they didn't necessarily have higher anxiety scores, suggesting that there's other reasons why they're not able to complete OIT. So changing gears, how do we help? And this is one study that we have ongoing. It's basically a study that can happen when someone is here as part of one of our other studies and they're undergoing food challenges. And what we're trying to do is understand how we can make some of the procedures here in our clinic less anxiety provoking. And so food challenges are certainly a difficult thing for people to undertake. You know, you're having to eat the allergen in increasing quantities, and of course they're great when they're successful after OIT, but they can certainly be anxiety provoking. And so we actually partnered with several other researchers at Stanford to design a game. It was initially with virtual reality, but now we're using what's called an augmented reality headset. Basically, you can see through the lens of the headset, so you can actually see the real world, and then the virtual game is overlaid on the real world. The groups we worked with were the Virtual Human Interaction Lab and Chariot here at Stanford to create this game. And it's somewhat simple, but basically overlays a campsite in the woods, and folks, it's only for kids that we're doing the study, but basically they can cast magic spells to grow trees. They can look around, there's a campfire, and it's designed to distract them and make them not think about so much their potential anxiety with the food challenge. And some early results, this was when we were initially using a virtual reality headset, were promising in a small group. The kids tended to say that they were not thinking about the food challenge or what they were eating when they were playing the game. And they would, a significant percent said they would like to do it in the future with another food challenge. So again, this is ongoing. We're in a different phase, actually comparing this to a control group. Each person gets the headset for one food challenge and then doesn't for the other, and we're trying to see if there's a difference. And lastly, I mentioned I would just touch quickly on food allergy, anxiety, and COVID-19, because I think obviously a lot of our lives have been colored by the pandemic for the last several years. But certainly there's a concern from our group, and I think just in general, about how folks with food allergy have coped during the pandemic, and you know, concerns about access to safe foods, those types of things. But interestingly, at the beginning of the pandemic, actually visits for anaphylaxis fell quite significantly, which may in part have been a rethinking of when folks would go to the hospital after giving epi. There was an initial concern about exposures. I don't think that concern exists at this point. I would not necessarily recommend this. Of course, if someone needs epi and needs care, please go seek care. We are, as a medical establishment here, and happy to see you. It also may have been actually from less accidental exposures because people can control their environments more. And so in terms of studies actually looking at anxieties around food allergy and COVID-19, there's been a few, and it's really actually kind of mixed. So generally speaking, overall anxiety due to the pandemic itself has gone up, but not necessarily anxiety specific to food allergy. So that has been unchanged, or in some cases actually decreased, maybe related to some feelings of increased control. As I said, if you're in lockdown, you're at home, you're not going out, then you have more control over, what foods you eat, more control to avoid exposures. And that might actually be more heartening, less anxiety provoking. Also a sense of now everyone being at a sort of heightened sense of caution makes people feel less anxious, because it sort of feels like we're all in the same boat. But still definitely concerns about access to foods, access to safe foods. So ongoing issues still to come, and I think more study needs to be done. The other thing I'll point out is the studies so far tend to be in those of higher SCS groups. So definitely something where it would be great to understand more about those who are in a lesser socioeconomic status dealing with food allergy. Their sense of the pandemic and anxiety and food allergy may be a bit different. So with that, I'll conclude. I wanted to show this. This is our puzzle piece of current studies that we're recruiting for. I can add our augmented reality study here as well, at least telling you about that. But generally speaking, it's for folks who are already in one of our other trials. And please always reach out. We'd love to see folks, and love to be able to enroll participants as we can, and try to help out. And I just want to say thank you to everyone here, and to all our collaborators and supporters. And with that, I can look and see if there looks like maybe there's one question in the Q&A.
Yes. What about anxiety levels improving after OIT for multiple allergy patients?
Yeah, so as I was saying, there are studies looking at folks who underwent OIT for multiple allergies, and basically it's similar. So in terms of like those who had a single allergy and underwent OIT for that, they do tend to show improvement, and it's the same when we look at studies where it was multi-allergen OIT, and even multi-allergen OIT with other therapies.
Okay, the second question. What are some ways to help a multiple allergy kid manage and dissipate anxiety?
That's a great question. I think it's probably in my mind, and I would love to sort of think through and talk about this more, but I think some of it, and some of the ways we try to help here, is just through education. I think part of the reason we see anxiety go down as people have treatment or go through oral immunotherapy is in part just education, understanding how tolerant they are to certain allergens, and also understanding like when to use treatment, when to seek more care. I think just knowing a little bit more about what might happen, and understanding how to take care of yourself better can be one way to help with anxiety.
That's all the questions we have. We'll wait a couple seconds if anybody else has any questions.
Sure.
And if not, we'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you very, oh, there
Oh.
goes one more question. Okay. Same multiple allergy kid as above, how to help with bullying and school issues.
These are all great questions, really great questions. I think some of it is hopefully, as I said, kind of education, but also normalizing, the information we show at the top is really trying to make the point over and over that, a lot of kids deal with food allergy. And as much as we can, be upfront about that fact and that it's not something that makes those kids abnormal or kids who should be bullied, but that, it's something that a lot of people are going through, and it's on the rise, and it's really something that we're trying to work towards. I guess that's more kind of educate globally. As far as specific situations, it's hard to know without knowing more about exactly, who's involved. And so I wouldn't want to speak too directly to that. But I think just the general hope is that people understand that this is a real issue for kids and that it's on the rise, and that we really need to be helping, because it can affect all of us. And many of us here, we know someone or know other people who have been affected by it. And I think there was another question.
Yes, have you seen any ties to allergies and teen suicide rates?
I don't know the data on that. I apologize. That's a great question, and certainly something that I can look into. Actually, I'll try to look into that, and in follow up, if there's some information we can try to provide that. That's a really great question, and I apologize. I don't know the answer.
Okay, regardless of OIT, do anxiety levels change when a child with food allergies become teenagers?
These are great questions, man. I feel sorry not to be as prepared, and maybe I'm making the point to myself, these are things we really need to understand more. So as far as do they change when a child with food allergies become teenagers, it's probably a bit mixed in terms of some kids have much more awareness of their allergies when they're younger, and perhaps as they grow older, they become more educated, maybe more used to living with it. And so for them, actually becoming a teenager, anxiety levels go down. But the opposite may be the case, where, it was easier in terms of their environment to control exposures. And then as they become teenagers and become more aware of themselves and their emotional health, then it actually is more anxiety provoking. So I think it could go both ways.
Do you anticipate better food labeling? Everything says made in a factory, which makes things much harder.
I don't necessarily anticipate better food labeling right away, but it's certainly something that I know a lot of larger national groups are trying to work on, trying to be more clear about food labeling. And it's a tough issue, because you're right, you do see those like statements where it's almost like they've got to cover themselves by saying, well, this is made in a factory where other allergens might exist. Oftentimes, folks understand if that's something that they need to worry about or not. But you're right. In general, food labeling is an ongoing issue. I don't know that there's an immediate solution, but certainly something that folks are advocating for.
Okay, another question. The recent addition of sesame as a top 9 allergen has really backfired for the food allergy community. Manufacturers are now adding sesame to food so that they comply with clear labeling, but that results in fewer safe items for sesame allergy families.
Okay. I think that's more maybe a statement than a question, but I appreciate it. And definitely something to be aware of. So I appreciate the input there. I think it just speaks again to the, the sources of anxiety for not only kids, but also the families of folks dealing with this and trying to, understand food labels, understand what is safe. So I appreciate the comment.
Okay, if there are no any other questions, we're going to conclude the present webinar.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Great questions, and I really appreciate the engagement.
I put our links off on the chat. So if you are interested in our clinical trials, we have a link there. And if you want to sign up on a registry, I included that. For the videos for the will be placed on our YouTube channel. The link is right there. And if you want to, there's also a registration link for future Ask the Webinars if you want to share that with your friends. Thank you very much. And I enjoyed being part of helping you guys out. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.